Hello there, my name's Michelle Lewis, and I'm the Executive Director of Young Caregivers Association. And about this time of year, every year, Jen asks me to come and speak to her class about the unique children, youth, and families that we support in our organization. And given the current circumstances, I offer to provide it by video, so at least you can still get the information. And my email address will be provided at the very end. If you have any questions, just feel free to send me an email. Now, I'm not a videographer, so I'm going to do my best to make this work, and hopefully technology is on our side today. And I am at home, so if a child, dog, or husband appears, just don't make direct eye contact and we should be fine. So what we're going to talk about is just the history of our organization, who we are today as an organization, who are young caregivers in Canada. We have some data that I'll share as far as what it looks like in Canada for young caregivers, how we use research to inform everything that we do. We have a program called Powerhouse in Schools that I'll talk about, which is very unique. And then I'll talk about how we measure impact and what we require from professionals, including future professionals who are all of you. So let's get started. Our program started in the early 2000s. We're the very first young caregiver program in Canada to support young caregivers in both rural and urban communities. You'll see in the top right-hand corner here, that was our original branding, our original logo. We were established in 2003 out of the work of the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara. So a couple of women doing their case management there were going into people's homes, and they saw that there were children and youth struggling with anxiety and stress because of having somebody with dementia in the home. It was either a parent with young onset dementia, a grandparent, other family member who was in the home. And they were able to then identify around 75 kids who were in this role and who were struggling. So they decided they needed to do something about it. They got some money through a grant, and they had two main goals. They wanted to start a community network of agencies that worked with families and that were able to help identify the young caregivers in our communities. And they wanted to do a literature review to see what's going on in the world when it comes to young caregivers. What should we be doing? Is this even a thing? Because at that point, they didn't even know, what this was all about. So in the beginning, they had 17 community agencies that were recruited. Those agencies came together around a table. We had young caregivers join the working group, and it was really all about what do we need to do together, what do these kids need, and what can we do as professionals. In 2005, a professor at Brock University, who's still there in the Child and Youth Studies Department, her name's Dr. Heather Chalmers, she conducted the very first study in Canada on young caregivers, and it was really about who are they? Because nobody's ever talked to these kids before in Canada. Nobody knew caregiving was a thing, really. In the early 2000s, family caregiving wasn't acknowledged, never mind kids doing that role. So we knew very little. In 2006, as an organization, under the name Young Caregivers Initiative, we had a conference, and we had the very first conference in Canada about young caregivers. And we had about 100 people come, and people came from all over the place, from across Canada, from the US, and from even the UK. And the theme of that conference was called Bouncing Back. So it was really about the resilience of young caregivers at the time. We continued our work with dabbling in some programming as kids were being identified, and we started to recognize who these kids are in our community. We started to dabble with some programming to provide them some support, and we became an independent registered charity in 2007. With that, then we took all the data that we had from Dr. Chalmers' study. We took all what we learned from working with the kids that we had, from what we learned with the agencies, and we became funded. So we became healthcare funded, which at the time the model was the Local Health Integration Networks. So the acronym is the LINs, and our LIN is that of Hamilton, Niagara, Haldeman, Norfolk, and Brant. Right now, with the whole restructure of healthcare in Ontario, the LINs are being dissolved, and we're moving to a structure where it's called Ontario Health. So we are currently working hard on making sure that we're a part of some Ontario Health teams when these LINs no longer exist. So who we are today. We went from being the Young Caregivers Initiative with that logo that you saw previously, the kids told us that it looked like two aliens coming out of a spaceship. So we decided we needed to really look at who we are, and what is it that we want to accomplish. So in August of 2018, we had a big meeting, and we invited young caregivers, their parents, community agencies. We had some researchers there. We had some local politicians. And it was about, who are we? What do we want to be? And what do we need to do differently to get there? And what it really came down to it is, we were told to step up and be leaders, and that it was time to be leaders in Canada. We've been doing this for a very long time. We're the first program, we're the only funded program in Canada that does what we do, so we need to do more. So we took that message to heart and we rebranded with focus groups with young caregivers and parents and community agencies. We took a look at our branding, our name, and in the end, we took it to a vote, and that's where we landed at Young Caregivers Association. So you can see here is our new logo for our registered charity is now Young Caregivers Association. When it came to that name of Powerhouse Project from the past, we actually had kids very emotional saying, don't change Powerhouse. So we've just ditched the project because we were told you're no longer a project, which we agree with. So this is the name that we use for our program that kids and families attend is Powerhouse. So our new vision as an organization is a Canada where young caregivers and their families are recognized, supported, and empowered to achieve their potential. So we really opened ourselves up nationwide to say we need a Canada that does more and that recognizes more, and we are going to do our best to position ourselves to be the leaders in that. And our mission is to be the leader in service, awareness, and empowerment for young caregivers and their families across Canada. So who are young caregivers? Young caregivers are, for our organization, there are children and youth ages 5 to 25. They have a family member at home who is ill or disabled, and when we talk about illness, we're talking about physical illness and mental illness, and we're talking about physical and intellectual disabilities. These young caregivers are taking on extra responsibilities to help with their loved one being at home. So it goes beyond what would be considered typical chores, being considered typical family activities to run a household. These kids step in and take on what would typically be considered adult responsibilities. So there's those practical things like laundry dishes, making lunches, making dinners, cutting the lawn, doing the yard work. But again, it's above and beyond chores. There isn't an adult that can step in and do that task if the child doesn't do it, that these responsibilities do land on the child. The physical and personal care include things like providing medicines, doing that personal care of bathing and grooming, helping loved ones get dressed, helping when it comes to mobility, it's helping people in and out of vehicles, in and out of wheelchairs, prosthetic limbs, helping attach and detach those. And it's when we say supervision, typically we see this when it comes to a loved one with dementia that requires constant supervision if they're in the late stages of the disease, that they can't be left alone just because of safety concerns, and even siblings. So we have kids who have siblings that can't be left alone. It's a safety concern. They'll run out on the road, or they'll leave the house, or they'll be a danger to themselves, and they have to be under constant watch. So we do have young caregivers who, when their mom or dad or whoever in the home is making dinner, they're the ones who have to be with their sibling for that time. And then the emotional care is a piece that we've been paying closer attention to, and it's being that cheerleader for that loved one and for your family. So if you've ever had to kind of be the cheerleader for another person, I'm sure you've experienced that. That can be very exhausting. It can take a lot out of you. So our young caregivers are the ones who are holding the hand of their loved one, helping the family get through their days. They're, just being that distraction, being that upbeat person. But they also have emotional impact of what's going on by worrying about their loved ones. We had a young boy that had, his mom had diabetes, and he actually witnessed his mom passing out and hitting the floor before, and he would be in school completely distracted, and then he would start acting out, and what it turned out to be was that he was just constantly worrying about mom when he wasn't with her. Is she checking her blood? Is she taking her snacks? Is she taking care of herself? So we were able to talk to the school and have him use a phone to check in with mom once in a while through the day, to ease his mind, to allow him to focus. And that little strategy did wonders for him, because he just needed to hear her voice and check in and know she was okay. So our Youth Advisory Committee made a video, and I'm just going to have to pull it up here. Just bear with me for a second. And they created a video to share their story about what caregiving means for them, and to teach us a little bit more about their own experiences. So these are our Youth Advisory Committee members. So they're teenagers, they're in high school, and they created this video because they wanted to take a more active approach in helping build awareness and sharing their story and advocating for what they feel they need. So as future professionals in your field, working with children, youth, and families, it's important that you are also aware of what's going on behind closed doors and what these kids have going on in their lives that they're not necessarily telling everybody about. And just what they're saying is what, their wishes and what they wish professionals knew or did for them. So I'm going to share that video with you right now.
My name is Austin. I'm a young carer. Can you see me?
My name is Rebecca, and I am a young carer. This stop sign is what I wish I could hold up. I wish I could stop all the challenges for myself and for my family. I wish I could stop the challenges for my brother that he faces every day of his life. I wish there was a way to stop the worry and the concern I have each and every day. I wish I could hold up the sign and stop it all. The worry, the stress, the concern, and the challenges. Just stop time. If I cannot stop it, how can I slow it down? How will I cope?
My name is Perrin, and I'm a young carer. This clock represents what I wish I had, time. I'm young, but between working 2 jobs to save up for college, still being enrolled in high school, and taking care of my siblings, I don't have much time for myself. I don't have much time to hang out with friends, spend time doing homework, or doing the things that I enjoy, the things that most of people my age can do. There's always a responsibility that I have to take care of, something that I need to do. I'm an employee, a student, a counselor, a provider, and a protector. I wish there was a way I could have more time for myself.
My name is Brandon. I am a caregiver. This brand represents how I feel. I feel that people do not understand me or my caregiving responsibility. When I have a lot to do at home, I am unable to sleep. Because of this, I am unable to focus, unable to think about anything else other than what is going on at home. I fall behind in my work and fall behind in my classes. I have failed classes because I cannot focus. I wish people can understand how I think. I wish people can understand me.
My name is Peter, and I'm a young caregiver. This megaphone represents what I need. I wish the medical professionals, doctors, nurses would listen to me. I wish that when I talk to them about my father, they would understand that I know what I'm talking about. I see it every day. I am the one looking after him day in, day out. I am helping with medical requirements at home. I am caring for him. Please listen to me and speak to me, as I am the one that is caring and looking after someone else.
My name is Zahira, and I am a young carer. This first aid kit represents who I am and how my family sees me. I'm the one at home that everyone comes to for help. I'm the one who helps my younger sisters by looking after them, helping them with schoolwork, bedtime routines, and so on. I'm the one that helps my mother. I care for my sisters when she needs to work. I help my mother cook the meals and pack lunches. I am the one that helps the nurses and support workers with my sister. I am the one that makes sure she is okay. Where can I go to for help? Who do I turn to?
My name is Cody. I'm a young caregiver. These weights represent what I carry. I carry the stress every day. I care about my little brother. Is he okay? Is he safe? I care about my little sister. Is she happy? Is she safe? I care about my mother and father. I care about their well-being, their health, and their happiness. Some days the weight is really heavy. Some days the stress is really heavy.
My name is Mackenzie and I am a young carer. These books represent my education. I struggle to divide my time between my schooling and my responsibilities at home. I want to get the best grades possible, take all the top courses, and get top of my class in everything. But I have to care for my younger siblings at home, and myself when my dad is at work. Along with homework getting done, there are other things that need to get done at home. I wish my teachers could understand my caregiving responsibilities. I wish they could see my other homework.
My name is Austin. I'm a young carer. Can you see me now?
We are young carers. Can you see us?
There we go. So that is a pretty powerful video that they created all on their own to help share their stories. And as we heard, the things that they wanted were simple. It was just recognition, acknowledgement, healthcare professionals hearing them, knowing that they know what they're talking about. They just want respect and respect in their role as caregivers. We also had a program called Voices that we did, and some of these are posted on our website, giving the young caregivers in our program a chance to illustrate for us, write stories, write poems on what a day in the life for them looks like with their caregiving. So here we have Daisy, who drew this picture of her holding her little brother, William, who has cerebral palsy and is in a wheelchair. And her big brother standing behind them. And here we have a 16-year-old that says the things that they have to do are give explanations. They're giving things up. They give medication. They have extra responsibilities, and they provide emotional support. So it's very impactful to hear from the kids themselves what caregiving looks like for them. And here's just a few more. We have an 8-year-old who's making bacon and eggs because mom has MS and isn't able to get up. And we have here, this little boy is 7 years old, and he actually called 911 and saved his mom's life. So when you just think about a 7-year-old feeling comfortable to call 911 and to know what to actually say, and to get those emergency response people to your home quickly enough to save your mom's life, that's pretty incredible. So when we're talking about young caregivers in Canada, there's very little data because it's a fairly new concept in Canada. We do have a handful of researchers that have been doing wonderful work, but the only way to know how many young caregivers we actually have in our country is to use the General Social Survey data from 2012. There's a question on that survey about caregiving. The problem is the survey only is for ages 15 plus. So Dr. Vivian Stamatopoulos took that data and she crunched it down, and so she was able to provide a number of young caregivers that are in Canada for ages 15 to 24. And according to her numbers, there's 1.25 million. Now that's only ages 15 to 24. What's important to note is that the majority of kids who come to our program are actually under the age of 15. So there's a whack of kids out there that aren't captured in this number. And when you look across the country, Ontario has the most, which makes sense when you go based on population. But we have over 500,000 young caregivers. Again, that's only ages 15 to 24. So we know that there's many more out there. And why this is important to know is that this isn't a small piece of the population of children and youth that we're speaking about here. This is a significant chunk of our children and youth in our province and in our country who are in this role. So the number of hours per week that young caregivers provide, Dr. Heather Chalmers was able to put this together for us. So when we're talking about caregiving, what does that actually mean on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis? How much time are young caregivers actually spending in this role? And Dr. Chalmers in 2017 was able to put this together for us, and we know now that in Canada on average young caregivers are providing 14 to 27 hours per week. So that means that that's pretty much a part-time job. Per day, it's about 3 to 6 hours that about a quarter of our young caregivers are providing. And again, that's a significant chunk of time per day. So what Dr. Chalmers did was she took a look at the different kinds of things that young caregivers do. So back to that previous slide, the personal care, the practical care and the emotional care. And if you were to actually have to pay for those services, so what does personal support work cost per hour? What does housekeeping cost per hour? All those kinds of roles that young caregivers are supplementing with their caregiving. And if families had to pay for that, or if the healthcare system had to pay for that, it works out to about $25,000 to $50,000 per young caregiver a year in service that these kids are providing. So again, this isn't insignificant. So what we know about young caregivers is that they're not recognized by professionals. You heard them say it themselves in their video. They're not recognized by their teachers. They're not recognized by their social workers, by home care workers. Pretty much they're not recognized by the majority of professionals that work with children, youth, or families. So what happens when you go unrecognized? You go unidentified, which means you go unsupported. And what we know is that young caregivers are higher risks when compared to their non-caregiving peers. A PhD student out of Brock University, Jana Lackman, she did some groundbreaking research to show what those risk factors actually are. So she compared 124 young caregivers to 124 non-caregivers to see what the risk factors are between the two groups. And she was able to then filter out what factors were higher, significantly higher in some cases for young caregivers themselves. So what we know is that without recognition and without support, young caregivers are at a higher risk, that's easy for me to say, of higher stress levels, higher anxiety levels, having low self-esteem, feeling isolated because they feel different compared to their friends, their peers. They feel like there's something different with them, and sometimes that can be a very isolating feeling if you feel like, you know, I'm the only one in my class that has a family like this, or I'm the only one in my class who misses out because I have to be home. That can be very isolating. We know that they're at higher risk for depressive symptoms. And we know because of caregiving and having to essentially be home after school, or because the family is not able to drive, that they get off the bus after school and they go home, and they get on the bus next day and they go back to school. That there's less opportunity for them to have physical activity. So they're not necessarily in their neighborhood with their friends riding their bike after school or playing. They're not necessarily able to get out to sports teams or to extracurricular events. So we know that they have less opportunity for physical activity. And all of this can make you feel pretty darn lonely. So we know that they have a higher risk of feeling extra lonely because of the circumstances that they're in. So in that video, we had our young caregivers talk about those risks, and they said, I can't focus on school. My friends don't understand. I worry when I'm not around them. Are they safe? Cody kept telling us as he continued to worry about the safety of his siblings due to the circumstances at home. I have no time for myself. Some of them even say that they wish they could help more, and they feel guilty because of their own limitations and the amount that they can help, or they wish that they could, make it all better or take it away. But we also know that there's an upside of caring. It's not all doom and gloom, that caregiving can bring out the best in people, and it provides opportunity for skill development. So we also hear our young caregivers speak about the fact that they build skills, they build independence. These kids are far wiser beyond their years. They're the things that they know and the things they've experienced, and the level of insightfulness they have and comprehension they have about what's going on, they're beyond their years and what they know. Communication skills. Some kids say it brings their family closer together. It makes them feel closer to their family. It puts them in a position of behaving more maturely because of the things that they take on. So we pay very close attention to what our young caregivers tell us, for the good and bad. Anything that they suggest as far as what we can do to improve programming is we take very seriously, as well as the impact that we're having. And one young caregiver who's 14 years old said that there should be more powerhouses around Canada because it helps kids with siblings or parents who are disabled or need help around the house. And it just gives young caregivers time to be free and be kids for a few hours. And one of our members, I remember when he was younger, he said that he loves coming to Powerhouse because for a few hours, he doesn't have to be a dad to his siblings. And that, I've never forgotten those words. That was very impactful. So Dr. Vivian Stamatopoulos, the researcher I referred to before, with the research that she's been doing, she coined a term and she calls it the young carer penalty. And you'll see that the terms young carer and young caregiver are used. Young carer is an international term. When we talk about caregivers, carer is what's used in the UK and in Australia. So they mean the same thing. So researchers will use the young carer language in order to have relevance on the international research front. So it means the same thing. So what Dr. Vivian said is that there's this thing she's called the young carer penalty. And what that basically means is that there's short-term and long-term harm, essentially, that can be caused when caregiving goes unsupported or when the caregiving exceeds what should be reasonable for a child their age to do. And in some cases, when you're a family and you're doing what you need to do for your family to be successful, you just do it. You just do it because you want to help your family and you want your family to be successful and you want to help your loved ones. So what we know is that in the long term and short term, if there isn't support provided, there's risks. We go back to all those risk factors that I just spoke about. And we know that because of those risk factors, there's potential harm to academic, social, and professional development. And what Vivian says is it ultimately compromises their well-being and their own development in the absence of supports and safeguards. So what she's saying is that without support, we know that ultimately the lives of these kids will be compromised by what they're able to achieve academically, professionally, and their social well-being and their own well-being. If you're a young caregiver in high school and your grades are affected and, financially there's an impact of having illness or disability in the home, maybe post-secondary education isn't an option for you as a young caregiver. So your academic and professional growth and opportunities are minimized. And with that, there's long-term effects to that. So what we know as well is that caregiving is not a short-term role, especially if it's a sibling that requires the care. What happens when those parents are gone and they're no longer with us? We have siblings who have said that they know that they are the ones who will continue the care for their brother or sister. Just because somebody turns 18 or 19 doesn't mean the caregiving goes away. It can follow them well into adulthood. And that's why it's imperative when these kids are young that they are supported so that they can be better adjusted as caregiving adults instead of having all the stress build and build and build over time, and then they're adult caregivers in the adult world and still not able to necessarily cope very well. So Dr. Stamatopoulos confirmed that supporting young caregivers now can prevent future social, psychological, and economic penalties experienced by young caregivers across the lifespan. So supporting them now when they're young can help prevent those penalties. It can still be difficult. Caregiving can still be difficult. We can't change what's going on at home, but by building their skills and building their ability to cope and letting them know that they're not alone, reducing that loneliness, reducing that isolation can have huge impact on the future trajectories of these kids. So I've referred a lot to research. We value research very much. Dr. Chalmers was a part of our organization from the very beginning, and she still plays a very key role in our organization as far as having that direct research connection to her and her students. And what we know is that we have to pay attention to that research. It has to inform what we do in order to make sure that what we're doing is designed to meet the needs of young caregivers, that response may look different rurally than it does urbanly. So those city kids versus country kids, maybe it doesn't look the same. Maybe it has to be done differently. And we paid very close attention to research in the very beginning, and we can continue to do so to make sure that we're doing the very best we can in a very informed way. What we know is that Powerhouse is a proven model of support, and given our rebranding and all of the conversations we had with our young caregivers and their parents and community folks, we know that it's time to get this out there to benefit as many young caregivers across Canada as possible. And we're having lots of conversation with folks across Canada to see how we can get some powerhouse going in other provinces. We've always had a co-design approach, and what that means is that there's young caregivers at the table. So from the very beginning stages, when we had that steering committee of 17 agencies, there were young caregivers at that table. We have our youth advisory committees who, you know, one of them created the video that you saw, and we make sure we go to them and that we get their input on anything that we're doing organizationally, as well as when it comes to programs. They have input on the types of things that we should be doing and the kinds of programs that we should be running. So here's what we do in a nutshell. Everything that we provide is free. Everything that we do, we want to empower our young caregivers and their families. We want to give them a break from their responsibilities. We want to reduce their isolation, their caregiver fatigue, and we want to help alleviate their stress and anxiety. What we know is that there's nothing we can do at home. If we can help them feel a little less stressed when they're with us in program, we can't ease the stress of what's going on at home. If, you know, somebody's really sick at home, that's going to be stressful no matter how hard we try to make it not that way. It's going to be. But what we can do is help, again, teach those skills on how to deal with that stress, or help them have some time feeling a little stress-free while they're in program with their powerhouse friends. So our outcomes, so we do a lot of outcome measurement with our funding. We have a lot of reporting that we have to do. And we can't just, you know, do crafts with kids. We have to have purpose. We have to measure, what are we actually doing? What is the impact we're actually having on these lives in order to make them better, their families better, and ultimately strengthen our communities. So the things that we have to measure and report on are in the middle bubble here, this burgundy bubble here. We have to report on the fact that these kids are reporting to us a decreased feeling of isolation. They have higher self-esteem. Caregiver burden, we don't use the word burden internally. It's a very negative word, but basically the amount of stress that you're under because of your caregiving, which we're trying to alleviate that a little bit. We want to improve self-care. We want to improve abilities to cope. We want to improve overall well-being. And we want our clients to feel like they're involved in their care with us, and ultimately we want to reduce their stress levels. So we do this in a variety of ways. We have Caregivers Night Out, which is a weekly respite program that runs in a variety of communities of Haldimand, Norfolk, and Niagara. The kids come out for 2 hours of program, and it's based on a monthly theme that's around some sort of aspect of overall wellness and health and you know, caregiver stress. We have life and personal development skills, and these are things like cooking, self-care, coping, anger management, any of those types of things. Again, we have our youth that inform us of what those things should be that we're offering. We have family events. Our families say these are very important to them because it gives them a chance to get out as a family. If you have loved ones with mobility issues, they can't get in and out of vehicles, they are in wheelchairs, or they you know, have walking devices, getting out and about can be difficult. It's also very expensive to get out as a family, to go to the movies. That may not be an option, but it's also, for my family to go to the movies, we're looking at a minimum of $60 just for the 4 of us to go to a movie. That's not doable for a lot of folks, right? So our family events provide a free opportunity for families to come together, to do something together. It could be something as simple as a board game night, to, you know, going swimming. We'll rent a swimming pool, to have bowling, anything like that that brings the family together. Our young adult programs are there for our young caregivers that are 19 plus, because in that age group you have different stresses, different goals, and you have different needs ultimately. Our teen programs are for those 13 to 18-year-olds. Again, the content is different because your needs are different. Topics are different. What you are going through is different. So we need to make sure that we have things that are geared towards that age group. Special events are those opportunities to just get out and explore your community. Again, if you have a family that can't get out and about, you don't know necessarily what your community has to offer. Going to Clifton Hill and Niagara Falls, for example, is an experience that so many of these kids have reported that they haven't been able to do as a family. So we provide them that. You know, bowling, anything like that, where it's just an outing in the community to give experiences and opportunities that their peers typically get to have. So it gets them to do things that makes them feel less different. Summer camp is very important to us. Summer is a time when our young caregivers are home 24/7. They're no longer in school. They don't get that break during the day. And again, for those families who aren't able to have their kids participate in camp or go on vacation, summer camp is there for these kids to get a break, to get some fun, and just to have a camp experience. It's very important for them to do age-typical activities and to come together and be with their powerhouse friends during the summer months. Our in-schools program was something we've piloted about 5 or 6 years ago, and now it's a funded program. And that's taking an 8-week powerhouse program to schools in 3 different school boards. And we run it for 8 weeks at a time. And it's to get to those young caregivers that we can't get to through our normal programming. And by going to them during the school day, we're able to reduce a lot of those barriers to access programs, like coming out in the evening, having people having to drive you. You may not be able to leave in the evening to come to a program. You may live in a community that's too far out for us to come get you, to help get you to program. So by going to schools in these smaller communities, we're able to access more young caregivers, support more young caregivers, and educate schools and teachers and staff in the schools about young caregivers and their needs. And we also have counseling services. So we do have registered social workers on our team. Their titles are Young Caregiver and Family Counselors, and they're there to provide one-to-one support, group sessions. They do therapy. They do it in all kinds of different ways, using arts and other means to work with the kids and their parents as well. So we do this across Haldimand, Norfolk, and we do have a program in Brant. So our head office is here in St. Catharines. We run weekly program in St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, and Welland. We also have in-school programs all across Niagara, from Ridgeway to Lincoln area, all across Niagara. We also have an office in Hagersville, which is right here in Haldimand County. We have a program that runs weekly in Hagersville, in Dunnville, which is here, and in Delhi, which is over here. We run various community events throughout Haldimand, Norfolk, and we also have in-school program running in schools in Brantford. So what we know is that awareness of young carers in Canada has grown, and it's grown just because of the work that's being done in the UK. There's been other agencies that have been very helpful in getting the word out and shining a light on young carers. And what we know is that, again, our organization being the very first organization and the one that's been doing this work the longest here in Canada, we're being turned to as experts in our field here and supporting young caregivers. So we are positioned very well to do more, and that's what we're really focusing on. So our in-school program, I talked about this earlier, but basically it's a win-win situation for all. We're not dealing with transportation barriers. We can go to where the kids already are. Schools are ideally positioned. So any of you who end up working in schools, schools are ideally positioned to know their students and to know what their students' circumstances are at home, what's going on at home. Is there a parent who's struggling with something, or there's a disability, or there's an illness in the home? That builds that sort of circle of support for these kids. So it's very important that we've been working with schools, and it also helps those kids know that they're not alone. When there's other students in their school participating in Powerhouse program, they know they're not the only one. So like I said before, it's an 8-week program, but what we do is we go in and we provide a presentation to the school. All the teachers, the staff, the students get a presentation. So that's, again, educating everybody in that school about young caregivers, and some teachers and staff learn about it for the very first time. The school helps us identify who the young caregivers are. We do our little assessment to make sure that, yes, they're a good fit and we're a good fit. And then our program's really just about doing what we do in our normal Powerhouse program in a condensed version. So it's an 8-week sort of Powerhouse condensed program that really helps the kids in the end develop a care kit. So each week they work on some aspect of care, of self-care, and they build a kit, and at the end of the 8 weeks they get to take their care kit home. And the idea is then when they're no longer with a Powerhouse program, they've learned enough with us and they've got the tools then with them to be able to get through those tough moments at home. Why is it important to have programmings in schools? Kids spend the most time at school or at home. So it's a huge partnership to be able to go into schools and access these kids that may otherwise be hidden and may otherwise go unidentified and unsupported. And we know that there's risks to that. So if we can work with the schools in identifying and supporting these kids, we're reducing their own risks and we're building a stronger community around them. One of our in-school participants said that it's called Powerhouse because you learn to have power over your emotions. So again, very important that we pay attention to what these kids are telling us. At the end of the 8 weeks, we then work with kids on creating a caregiver-friendly school. So they create a little board that goes up in the office or in some high-traffic area of the school, and they put their own messaging on that, on what caregiving means to them. And what they're really trying to do is, reduce the stigma around caregiving. They're trying to find those adult allies in their school. So if there's adults who also are caregivers for a family member or who once were a caregiver for a family member, it's encouraging them to share their story as well. So this young caregiver said, I always make sure my mom is okay because she has cancer. I never knew that I was a caregiver, but when I saw the Powerhouse video, I knew that I was a caregiver. So again, these kids aren't self-identifying. They don't know this is a thing. It's just life as they know it. So by seeing and hearing from other young caregivers, they're able to say, hey, wait a minute, this sounds like me. And they know they're not alone and that it's okay. It's okay to step forward and say, I'm a young caregiver. So these kids in the school created this board. It went up in their office. Some of the staff took it. We were told there was like a mental health fair that one school took the board to. And it's just getting everybody on board and getting the caregiving conversation going on in schools. So what does this mean about our program when it comes to evaluation? We do rigorous reporting and we measure a lot as far as before and after a program to see, did that program increase knowledge, increase understanding, did it make an impact? And then we also do our annual surveys where we're looking not just for satisfaction, but also impact opportunities to talk about impact and to learn what do we need to do better, but what have we done really well. So last year, after participating in Powerhouse programs, young caregivers 100% said that they learned coping skills. And that's really great for us to know because we really focused on coping skills that year. So we know, okay, we did what we wanted to do. Great. 96% felt more relaxed. 96% learned self-care. 92% felt less alone, and 100% would recommend our program to other caregiving students. So that's super important that these kids felt better after participating in our program, and that's really what we wanted. So that was the in-school program specifically. And then this is the evaluation that we do for our regular Powerhouse program. We ask things again to look at levels of burden, and again, we don't use that word, but overall well-being. So there's the positive sides of well-being and the negative sides, which would equal the burden stuff. So we take a look at both to make sure that, again, we're seeing where those pressure points are for these kids, but we're also responding to appropriately with program. So we said, because of Powerhouse, tell us the things that you've experienced. And again, here we had 100% say that they're better able to cope. Oops, sorry. So that's super helpful for us to know that, okay, we did that well. They feel like their life looks brighter, they know they matter, they feel less lonely, they feel less anxious, they're happier, they feel like they're learning useful things, they're less stressed. I said that they could cope better. I feel good about myself, I feel closer to my family, I feel that I'm helping out at home, and I feel like I'm doing something good at home. So all of these were 87% or higher, which is fantastic for us to know that we're actually seeing the results and what we're trying to do. And then we look for new opportunities. Okay, now what do we need to do different, or what do we need to do better? So So again, some in-school data, they learned positive coping skills, felt more relaxed, learned self-care, felt less alone, and would recommend this. This was taken from another school. So we've run the program several times and we evaluate after each one, so we know that our results are pretty consistent. So here's just some pictures of us in action. So again, those life skills programs, here's some simple yoga moves. So we think about, this was a family event, bring the family together. What are simple things we can teach you that you can do at home? What are simple recipes that we can teach you that you can do at home? And we'll teach you how to do it safely. And let's talk about the health qualities of each kind of recipe that we're doing. Let's just get outside and have fun and be outdoors and get some sunshine and some physical activity. Let's talk about deep breathing as a strategy that you can use, but let's use bubbles when we do that so that you have that visual cue of your breath, and it's fun because it's bubbles, it's a tactile activity, but it gives the kids something more than just sitting and breathing. It gives them that tool to use to make sure that they're doing it timed well and that they're doing it deep from their belly. So we use things like that. Special events. Here's a St. Patrick's Day event where it was just getting together for St. Patrick's Day, having green pancakes, and getting together with your powerhouse friends. And we try to be active as much as possible when we're in programs. These are just some examples of what we've done. So again, why we're pushing to try to be more and do more across Canada, because the researchers have validated that we have the most sophisticated model, and we've had our kids and families tell us it's time, step up and do it. So that's why we're doing it. So what we know is that we need more action for young caregivers. And this is, again, where you come in as professionals, future professionals in your field. And when you do placements and when you do volunteer work, open your eyes and see these kids, and you'll have knowledge that a lot of the folks you'll be working with have never heard of before. So what do we know? Young caregivers face many risks. They're not acknowledged by professionals. They don't feel heard. They can feel isolated, and their well-being is at risk. Caregiving is not a short-term thing. This isn't just something that's happening here and now. For many young caregivers, this is a long-term role for them. We know that they don't have necessarily the same opportunities as their peers, so they need support in order to ensure that they can have these opportunities. We need policy, we need awareness, we need education and supports. We need to improve the well-being of young caregivers in our province and across Canada. And you as future professionals can play a huge role in that. You heard in the video, I wish medical professionals would listen to me and know that when I talk about my father, I know what I'm talking about. I see it every day. I'm the one caring for him every day. You heard that in the video, and that is so powerful to know. That's all they want, is just that acknowledgement and to be heard. So together, we can ensure that young caregivers are no longer hidden. As professionals, when you have a family that you're working with, or when you have kids you're working with, and you know that there's a circumstance in their home that puts them in a position of being a young caregiver, acknowledge that. Talk to them about that. Ask them how that is, how they're feeling, how they're doing, how they're coping. What do they need? We can make sure that then they have better access to supports, because if you see them and you acknowledge them, you can then refer them to things that could help them. We know that together they can experience better resilience, coping skills that decrease in isolation. Just by acknowledging them and talking to them about it already makes them less isolated. We can ensure that young caregivers feel comfortable talking to others about their caregiving role. This role can be very secretive, especially if they feel like there's something going on at home that's very different from their peers, especially if they have parents who feel guilty about what's going on at home, or there's something at home that they don't want others to know about. It can be very isolating and secretive, and we want them to know that it's okay. You can be comfortable talking to us about what your family needs. We can together work on having young caregivers recognized by professionals in our province. That's where all of us come in as individuals and spreading the word and helping educate our coworkers and our peers. They can have long-term health improvements and mental wellness by increasing things like their self-esteem and their confidence. All of this comes down to identifying them and acknowledging their role. All of these things can build from that. And educational outcomes and having better employment opportunities. The long-term outcomes can be better for young caregivers if we work together on reducing that isolation for them. So I know that we missed out on the interaction piece that usually goes with these presentations. So like I said before, you're more than welcome to reach out to me by email. I'll try my best to answer to the best of my ability any questions you have. This is our website. This is my email address, so jot that down. If you look us up on YouTube right now, because of the social distancing, our staff are doing a variety of videos to try to reach our clients virtually. They're doing some facilitated activities through video and really just kind of taking snippets of what we would do in program and doing quick little videos of things that the kids can do at home. So we're making it very simple and very accessible so that kids can follow along and do some of the powerhouse stuff at home during this time of distancing. So they'll give you an idea if you go on our YouTube channel to check out some of the things that this is kind of what we would do on a bigger scale in program in person, but just sort of the idea of the kinds of things that we would do with our young caregivers. So thank you very much for your attention. It's always a pleasure to work with Jen and her students. I know this is kind of different this time around, but like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. And as the future professionals, you have a key role in improving things for young caregivers. Thank you very much.